Hello, listeners. What you're about to hear is a former Patreon exclusive episode.
Yes, that would be our, I'm sorry, Joe, our very, very, very first Patreon episode, all the way back from January of 2019, on Adam Robitel's Escape Room.
Indeed. Yeah, this is fun. You and I have not gone back to re-listen to this because, oof.
So we're asking you listeners to do that for us.
Indeed, yeah. Of course, we covered this back in the day, not just because Escape Room looked like it was going to be a fun film, but also because Adam Robitel is a queer director, so we wanted to give him the press.
Yes, and we are, of course, releasing the episode on Escape Room this week because the super fun-looking sequel, Escape Room Tournament of Champions, comes to theaters this weekend.
Indeed. Yeah, so Trace, this is an opportunity for us to reflect. Have your thoughts on the original film changed in the last couple of years?
Not, okay, I gave this movie a 2.5 out of 5 for Bloody, because I did review it for the site, and I think I think my overall mindset was, yeah, it's fun, it's too long, it's fine. I think I would probably bump it up to a 3 because I'm erring more on the good side of things.
Right.
That being said, I do think the sequel looks super fucking fun. So we'll see. What about you?
Yeah, I remember being frustrated by the antagonist character. I know we made comparisons to Samuel L. Jackson's character arc in Deep Blue Sea, and I think that argument still stands, but overall, I remember really liking a couple of these set pieces and maybe just wishing that there was a little bit more of them.
Yeah, for sure. But, I mean, we don't want to spoil the entire episode. So, I mean, listeners, if you have never joined our Patreon before, obviously you can head over to patreon.com/horrorqueers if you like what you hear in this episode and sign up, subscribe. We have a bunch of different price levels ranging from $1 to $10 that get you a variety of content. And I don't know, I think it'll be really fun. Although, again, let us know what you think of this because our formats have probably changed a little bit since we recorded this episode.
Yeah, we're hopefully a little bit more polished. You maybe won't be able to tell. As we said, it is that first one. But the other thing that you'll recognize is, of course, that we won't have a sign-off telling you what we're going to be covering next week. So we're going to tell you right now, and that is The Bride of Frankenstein, Trace.
Ooh, man. I think we just got so many requests for Universal Monsters, so we were like, let's put 2 of them in the summer. That'll be fun.
Indeed, yeah. And this is... yeah, it's going to be a great opportunity for us to revisit yet another Universal classic.
Absolutely. Creature from the Black Lagoon last month, Bride of Frankenstein this month, and of course, Bride of Frankenstein is directed by noted queer director and Horror Queers alumni, James Whale.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I am too, but we have gone on for far too long, so let's let these listeners get to the episode they came here for, and everyone will see y'all next week, so, alright, here we go.
Enjoy Escape Room.
You're obsessed with her, and you're obsessed with her daughter!
All right, easy, Geraldo.
And welcome to Horror Queers, the Patreon exclusive. We are talking about Escape Room, which is one of our 2 new releases that we're going to be covering this month, strictly for the people that we love the best, those of you who give us a little bit of money.
I was going to say the ones that pay us.
We are whores for your new release reviews.
Yes, and I love the fact that we are caught up on 2019 horror. It's the best feeling in the world.
This will actually be really helpful for me because I have a tendency to fall really far behind on new releases, so this will actually keep my head in the game.
I do too. I don't know if you know this, like every week, because I have a list on Letterboxd that I add. I go to Rotten Tomatoes every Monday and look at all the movies coming out, and if any of them are horror or thriller, I add them to my yearly horror list. But like 50% of them are bullshit movies, so it's kind of like, do they really count? I don't know.
Well, we love horror and we celebrate horror, but let's not lie to ourselves. There's a lot of shit horror as well.
There really is. But whatever, here we are. This movie is not shit, so I mean, I was kind of excited about that.
Which is true, and it's very exciting considering we are talking about the first release of January, which is traditionally the dumping zone for horror films, dating all the way back to 2005's White Noise, which...
Oh, God.
I don't think I even saw that.
You know, I when I first started writing for Bloody, I did a list on good horror movies that were released in January and February. Because, yeah, you're right. Both of these months are the dumping grounds. Although we are starting to see an uptick in quality in February movies, horror otherwise. Also, any horror movie released on Thanksgiving week. Those are always shit, too. I always remember, like, Wes Craven Presents They. That was the Thanksgiving release. And I saw that shit in theaters. Not good.
That and The Long Weekend in September.
I don't even know what that is. I have no idea what. I don't even think they got a release here. Maybe that was a Canada only thing.
Maybe. I mean, it's the end of summer, the beginning of January, and then Thanksgiving are traditionally low periods for audience attendance at the theaters. And typically that's when you see a bunch of Garbaggio enter the theater.
But as we've seen over the past couple of years, these January horror movies make bank.
Oh, yeah.
Because last year it was Insidious: The Last Key, which I was not crazy about, which sucks. I love that franchise. But also directed by Adam Robitel. Robitel? Is it like Rotel? I'm going to say Robitel.
Robishow? Robitel? Robitussin?
Yeah, I don't know. So yeah, we have Escape Room, directed by Adam Robitel.
Back-to-back January movies. Interesting.
Yeah. Also handed he was given a major franchise in Insidious last year, and then I guess he's kind of gets his own franchise starter, because this movie clearly is trying to start a franchise. That's, if the multiple endings are any indication of this movie, they really want to make sequels, and they probably will, considering it has a budget of $9 million and earned twice that its opening weekend.
Which is true. And before we go any further, we should probably once again clarify, we are going spoiler heavy, so we recognize that this is a new release, but we are going to be talking about the movie, so if you haven't seen it, encourage you to pause, come back after you've taken a gander. I mean, this is what, like a hot 90 minutes?
100 minutes.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
It felt fast.
Yeah, I mean, it mostly did. Also, I'm really glad you remembered to remind about spoilers, because I'm the worst about spoiling things for people and not giving a warning whatsoever.
Well, traditionally on the regular feed, I'm not overly concerned about reminding people because we tend to talk about older films, but we're talking about a film that came out, well, depending on when you folks are listening, at most, probably a couple of weeks ago. So, Escape Room from 2018. 2019. Idiot. We'll edit that out in post.
Yeah, no, you should keep that.
Okay, so here is your plot summary for all of us who have seen it, because I just told you to leave if you haven't seen it. I mean, I feel like we should always read the IMDb summaries because they're so hilariously either brief or off-kilter or just incredibly wrong. In this case, it's just extremely succinct.
By all means.
6 strangers find themselves in circumstances beyond their control and must use their wits to survive. There was a longer one that actually referenced the fact that they got a box and they end up in traps and they maybe have to hurt each other.
I actually kind of love the fact that doesn't even mention an escape room. It just says they're in circumstances beyond their control. Not 6 strangers participate in an escape room and might die, which is basically what the plot of the movie is.
Yeah. So, in case you're wondering, we're probably going to adopt a semi-structured format just to keep us on track. So, we're going to talk a little bit about the film in general. We'll talk about the characters. In this case, we're going to talk about the rooms in particular, those multiple endings, and then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts.
Yeah.
Don't hold us to it, but that's the goal.
Yeah, we're really bad about sticking to a structure. Only episode we've recorded so far where we had a really strict structure was Scream. And we dropped it immediately after that episode.
Yeah, that one didn't work out so well for us.
No, but nevertheless, I'm happy that people immediately get to listen to Hostel right after that. So if you're listening to this, I'm assuming you've listened to those episodes, but if you haven't, the Hostel episode's really good.
As always, they get better as they go along.
Yeah, honestly, they really have, I think.
All right, so Trace, run us through the actors in this film and give me some thoughts on what you thought of the characters.
Okay, so as I mentioned, Adam Robitel, he directed Insidious: The Last Key, and what got him his stature in the horror genre is he directed 2014's The Taking of Deborah Logan, which I thought was a pretty solid movie. I still think it's his best movie, but It might also be because he wrote that, or he co-wrote that movie. He did not co-write or have any part in the writing of Insidious or Escape Room, because this script is not great.
This one feels like it's been written by about 5 different people.
It's only been 2, and it's, I'm going to butcher these names, but it's Bragi F. Shute, or Shut, and Maria Melnick. Maria Melnick doesn't have a lot to her name, but Shoot or Shut, I'm just going to commit Shoot. It did write the Nicolas Cage flop Season of the Witch. That's the only notable thing he's done. So, not really high expectations going in, and I did know that that was the case kind of going in. Again, also January horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have, for our characters, the lead is Zoe, although honestly, she's the lead, but they do a pretty good job of splitting the screen time between all the characters. Like, it's not like Zoe's really featured that much more prominently than anyone else, but she is played by Taylor Russell, who I know from Judy Robinson on Netflix's Lost in Space.
Same.
And I actually do like her in that show. I like the kids in that show. I don't like the adults very much in that show.
Nah, which makes me sad because I love Molly, what's her name?
Molly Parker?
Yes.
I think it is. Yeah, no, the parents are the most obnoxious part of that show. Parker Posey can do no wrong, so that's fine. Then we have Logan Miller, who people may know from Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse, this little scene movie with James Caan and Keir Gilchrist called The Good Neighbor. Possibly the most likable character he has ever played, because he plays assholes in every single movie I've seen him in.
And he's pretty darn good at it.
Yeah, he is. But I liked him in this movie. Like, I think he did a pretty good job. Like, all these characters are kind of like flawed in their own way, but I liked him in this movie. Deborah Ann Woll, who is the MVP of the movie, listeners of this podcast may know her as Jessica from True Blood, aka the best part of those final awful seasons. She's in Daredevil as Karen Page, and she's also, for the horror crowd, in Darren Lynn Bousman's Mother's Day with Rebecca De Mornay from a couple years ago.
Which I haven't seen.
It's really good, actually. I would argue it's probably Bousman's best film, which isn't saying a lot because he hasn't made a lot of good movies. He did like Saw 3, 4, and 5, and then he did Repo, the Genetic Opera,
which I have a soft spot for, but it's not good.
I like Repo, but yeah, it's not good. It's visually pretty, but it's not good. Since Mother's Day, he hasn't really done a lot of good things. Like, he did some movie called 11-11-11, which came out on November 11th, 2011.
Ugh.
He did Abattoir a couple years ago, which I thought was really bad. And he has something coming out this year. Megan Navarre reviewed it for Bloody out of some festival and liked it. So,
is that Saint Agatha?
Yes, Saint Agatha.
Yes, that's coming out soon.
Yes, it is. So I'm hoping, I want him to make good movies because I do like more of his early stuff, and I think that Saw 3 is good. 4 and 5 are not, but 6 is really good, but I don't think he directed that one.
And we're not talking about the Saw movies.
I know. Sorry. Anyway, so moving on, but yeah, Deborah Ann Woll is great in this movie. She's Amanda. And then we have Tyler Labine, who you may know from Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. He plays Mike. And we also have Jay Ellis, who plays Jason, the biggest douchebag in this movie, who, spoiler alert, should have died way earlier than he did. And I don't watch this show, but I've heard it's really good, but he's from HBO's Insecure.
Yes, and he's actually quite delightful on that, so it's a very different kind of character for him.
See, I like that. I wish more actors would do that. I wish more actors would, like, play against type, but I don't watch Insecure. It's on my list to do, though. I will do it one day. And then finally, we have Nick Dodani, who is from Netflix's TV show Atypical, which my sister keeps begging me to watch. And also queer teen rom-com Alex Strangelove. I did leave one person off of here, but the game master who oversees like everything, who comes like in the 11th hour of the movie, he is the guy that rapes Lisbeth Salander in David Fincher's Dragon Tattoo movie. And then, she rapes him with a dildo and then tattoos Rapist Pig on his stomach.
Right.
I could not tell you his name, though, but that's who that is.
I have a really weird story about that movie, but we'll save that for another time.
Or listeners, if you want to know that story, just tweet us and he'll tell you.
There we go. Yeah.
So yeah, that's really all your characters. Like, basically, yeah, all these characters, they all share something in common that the movie hides, kind of.
It tries to pretend like we're not smart people and we can't figure it out very early on.
So that's the thing, though. I figured it out, but I thought that I was wrong because I was like, well, clearly there's something else. So, okay, this movie structure, it reminds me of 2 movies specifically. Cube, and the other one is Saw 5. Saw 5 specifically, because Saw 5, if you recall, involves a bunch of people waking up in a room, and it's basically escape rooms. They're all in traps. And basically, each trap kills one of them, and they move from room to room to room. And they realize that they all have a shared connection, which is like they all helped cover up some fire or something. And the twist ending is that they all could have survived the room if each room had they worked together.
Right.
And that's kind of what this movie is. It's kind of the exact same thing.
Okay, walking back.
Yeah.
So the other movie that this is like is 1997's Cube by Vincenzo Natali, who is Canadian. Hey-o.
He directed something else that's like super famous.
He's directed a couple of different things. I feel like a lot of people would now know him because he's been directing really good television. So he's done American Gods and he's done Hannibal.
That's exactly what it is.
And then he's directed one of my favorite films, which is Splice, the Sarah Polley, Adrian Brody, genetic mutation, mad scientist David Cronenberg wannabe.
I know what it is, and I do like that movie a lot. My husband's never seen it, and I really want him to watch it, because that movie... Ooh, man, there's some surprises in that movie.
Yeah, that movie has a little bit of something for everybody.
It really does, and I can see why anyone might hate it, but I love it.
I love it because it's nasty. Anyway, yeah. If anybody's listening to this and you're in Toronto, I am doing a screening of it in late January. So, hit me up for details.
Ooh, I will not be there.
No, you will not. So anyway, I was actually also going to say this reminded me of Jigsaw, which is, Saw 10?
8.
Saw 9?
Saw 8. Are you joking or are you being serious?
I can't remember the number because they did away with the numbers. They just... Anyway.
I don't love the Saw franchise, but I've marathoned that franchise probably 3 or 4 times in my life. I'm not proud of that, but I do think that 3 of them are very, very good movies.
Well, maybe if people want to hear your thoughts on Saw,
I know.
we could do a special episode where Trace can count down all of his Saw marathoning and recollection.
So Cube is also a similar concept. People wake up in a room, but it's much more sci-fi heavy because they have to go from room to room, but it's like they're inside a giant cube basically. Mm-hmm. And correct me if I'm wrong because it's been a while since I've seen it, but all the rooms look the same. They just have kind of a different theme.
So different lighting.
Okay.
Yeah, part of the reason that Cube works and also does not work for people is because visually it looks great, but it's also very repetitive because it's essentially a rich student film. So Vincenzo Natali needed a concept that he could film that only used one set. So then he just lights it differently and shoots it in a really intelligent way so that it makes it look like they're going from room to room. Obviously, when you compare that to something like Saw films or Escape Room, in this case, the budget is working in their factor. And as a result, we get much more elaborate, much more lush visuals.
Which I will say, I didn't know that about Cube, and that makes me want to go back and watch it and pay attention to the sets. The set. But Escape Room had a budget of $9 million, and honestly...
It looks good. I think it looks good.
Based on what happens in this movie and the sets they build, I expected it to be a lot more than $9 million. Because the sets are kind of the star of this movie. And the production design's fantastic. It's great. Honestly, the weakest part of this movie for me is the script. I wish the script were a little bit stronger. Even the PG-13 rating doesn't bother me that much because the kills, and honestly the rooms themselves don't really lend themselves to gore. So, that's good.
I would agree with you. Arguably, the one death, I'm putting in quotation marks here, is the bumper. So the film opens with Ben it makes it seem as though he's about to get crushed to death in a study because he hasn't managed to solve his puzzle. And of course, this is one of
the end of the movie.
It's one of my fucking favorite tropes of horror movies is when you begin in medias res and then you jump back. I mean, I guess in this way it is kind of a little bit clever because you're meant to believe that all the others have died, but...
No, it still doesn't work. Yes, Zoe is still alive. But the problem is, okay, that's one person, but you're still going into this assuming that everyone else is dead. So even though Zoe's alive, is kind of a surprise. I hate that she survives because when they kill her, quote unquote, I was like, oh, good for you, movie. Good for you. You killed the heroine. That's awesome. Didn't see that coming. And then they just totally pull back on it. But yeah, it ruins all suspense. There's no suspense from most of this movie.
Mm-hmm. It was more a question of who will die in what order.
Yes, which I'm also fine with. I actually was surprised by the order a little bit. This may just be me surprised that Deborah Ann Woll dies second. I thought for sure Tyler Labine was going to die way earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed pretty obvious to me that Danny was going to be the first to go because as the most knowledgeable person about escape rooms, he seemed like the most, you're going to get rid of the person who can help you the most. Like, you want to see these characters struggle their way through the rooms. So having a fucking bratty know-it-all is not great for that.
He's also the least famous person in the movie.
Yeah, it was a little frustrating because part of the reason that I was initially quite excited when I was looking at the cast listing is I was like, the diversity angle in this film, and yes, this is my social justice warrior angle coming out. If you don't like it, you're definitely on the wrong podcast. But I was like, hey, we've got a really good diverse cast in this movie. So then for them to immediately kill a person of color, not impressed. And then to also make one of the other people of color the angry black man trope was like, Jesus Christ. Movie.
They pull a twist with him too. I say twist because I think the movie thinks it's a twist, but it's not, because it's really obvious from the get-go that his backstory is like not as he's describing it.
Yes. Like I would be genuinely intrigued, and again, always feel free to tweet us. I want to know if anyone was actually surprised that he murdered his friend in his backstory, or that Zoe was actually dead. Because in both cases, I was like, am I supposed to be fooled by this shit? Because I ain't fooled by this shit.
I know. Well, I know. Yeah, it's whatever. So the beginning of the movie is a little clunky because it introduces Zoe. I've already forgotten the angry black guy's name. Jason. And Logan Miller's Ben. They're the only ones that we get to see before the escape room starts.
Yeah, so hint, who are your main characters?
Right. So, yeah, Zoe is an introvert in her college class, and her professor says, you should be a risk taker or something, and so, hence this. Jason is some rich businessman type guy who is a douche from the get-go. Like, you don't like him pretty much immediately. And then...
he's a suit.
Yeah, and then Ben is probably the most, like, interesting character, and that's kind of where this movie goes wrong, I think, is that, you're right, Zoe is the protagonist, but her backstory is so... thin. I mean, granted, all these characters are fairly thinly drawn. Like, they get their one moment of trauma, and that's kind of the only thing that defines them.
It's the cast that's elevating these characters and not the other way around.
Yes. Basically, so here we go. All the characters they don't share a trauma, but they share that they are the lone survivors of something. So, Zoe was in a plane crash that killed her mom, and she survived. Ben was drunk driving, and all of his friends died, and he was the only survivor.
Which... that to me was one of the more interesting ones because I wondered if the movie would end up trying to punish him, because in a way he and Jason effectively are the sole survivors because they killed other people, whereas all the other individuals are accident victims.
Correct. Although if it was going to do that, that would be a Saw movie. So not the right thing.
That is true. It's not a morality tale.
Yeah. Jason was on a boat? I don't know. Something sank and he was on a lifeboat.
They went yachting.
Yeah. Stupid.
Because he's rich.
And he basically says that his friend went nuts from hypothermia and swam away. But twist, midway through the third act, no, he killed him and took his jacket.
Mm-hmm. The tip-off was as soon as he saw the one jacket, and what's her face, Amanda? Is that right?
Yeah.
And Amanda's like, oh, they're trying to get us to fight with one another over limited resources. And then he looks at her like, bitch, I'm going to kill you for that jacket. Yeah.
Well, I have a question about that, but I'll finish getting through the characters. So yeah, Amanda, she was in Iraq and she was a survivor of a bombing. And then Mike, what was Mike's trauma?
Mike was in a cave-in in the mines.
Yes, and it killed his brother.
And his brother died.
Yeah. Honestly, Mike is the least fleshed out character in this movie. Like, Danny is more fleshed out than this guy.
100% coasting on Tyler Labine's charm, which is quite nice because it's always good to see Tyler Labine, but Jesus, he has nothing to work with apart from dad jokes.
Well, and I did appreciate the fact that they didn't make him the comic relief of the movie because he is a funny person. I was kind of nervous they were going to go that route, but they don't. So. Oh,
really? You don't think so?
I mean, he's funny, but he's not. I don't remember laughing out loud at any of his lines, so maybe they were trying to make him funny.
Yeah, people in my theater were definitely chuckling.
Well, he has a very anticlimactic death.
Oh, the worst. I was like, oh, really? Oh, he's dead now? Because that's really disappointing.
That, honestly, that whole sequence, after they discover their files, is kind of underwhelming. But we'll get there. And then, I don't remember what Danny's thing was, because he dies before they even discover what their issues are.
It's carbon monoxide poisoning. His entire family died except for him.
Okay, it's not really important. Yeah.
It's like a who cares? Like, oh, I found Danny's file.
Well, that's the thing. Honestly, I feel like they should have made that discovery before anyone died, but just my opinion. Because, and this is where I will say, and the only good thing I'll say about Saw 5 is that the reveal that they all helped cover up this fire and they all are kind of bad people was the only real interesting part of that movie. Whereas with this, I was hoping there'd be more of a connection between them, but that kind of comes into play later once the secret organization is introduced.
The hostile organization is revealed.
Yeah. So yeah, these people get brought to an escape room because they get like a Hellraiser type box and they solve it, which, by the way, that was hard. I would not have been able to solve that puzzle box.
But I did love the fact that Jason just goes on YouTube to solve his.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, because, I mean, this is what you do.
The movie's like, the rich people are lazy. So they go there, and I guess we'll just go to the rooms. The rooms, which are the most interesting part of this movie, they're the stars. And the movie moves at a pretty brisk pace, not staying too long in each room to where you get bored.
I feel like we should either rank them as we go or rank them at the end. Let's rank them as we go.
Yeah, and then we can just like recap at the end.
Okay, so the first room is actually the surprise waiting room. And if you've seen any of the trailers, this has already been spoiled for you because they obviously show the heat lamps going on and they show that the receptionist is a dummy and she starts to melt. And she kind of looked like Annabelle to me.
So she looked like there's a shot in the House of Wax remake where, like, you know, the house is melting and all like the wax figurines that are actually people are melting. It reminded me a lot of that, like the visual of that melting.
I mean, if you're going to evoke a melting room, you could do a lot worse than House of Wax. Absolutely.
So that movie has great effects, minus the wide shot of the house melting, which is really, really bad CGI. But up until that point, it's great. So yeah, they're in this waiting room and we don't really need to go through the puzzles, but I like this room a lot. This is probably one of the better rooms for me, but it basically turns into a giant oven, and they have to escape through a vent.
Now, did you see the fact that they would need the water coming when Zoe gave Amanda the glass? Were you kind of like, I think that's a mistake?
I did not. Did you?
I don't think that the coasters had been revealed at that point, but I did anticipate. Maybe we should take a step back before we go too much further. Have you done any real-life escape rooms?
So I did one during South by, but it was like a mobile escape room. Like, it was for HBO. So there was like one room themed after Veep, one room themed after Game of Thrones, one room themed after Silicon Valley. And I didn't know what escape rooms were. And this is like 2 years ago.
If you could see my face right now, it is like this look of just absolute disgust. Like, a room based on Veep? That sounds like the worst escape room ever.
We had to like pull ballots out. I don't know. It was really weird. We didn't solve that one. We did solve Game of Thrones and Silicon Valley, though. So that was a plus.
All right.
But yeah, it was HBO. So that's it. Have you done any escape rooms?
Yeah, I've got a friend of mine who quite enjoys them. I'm pretty awful at them, but I think we've done about 4 or 5. So we've done like a World War II one. We've done not a ton of really high concept ones, but like if I can jump ahead briefly to the end where they're testing the pilot simulation in anticipation of the sequel where they will snag Zoe and Logan once again. Or sorry, Zoe and Ben once again. Yeah. There's actually a plane escape room in Toronto that you can go and do.
Ooh, I don't know if I like that, but okay.
Yeah, so they can get pretty high concept like this. So the fact that Danny is, I mean, he's so annoying that it's almost unlikable, but the fact that he's spouting off all of those different types of escape rooms that he does, it's actually very, very on point.
I didn't find him that annoying. I thought he was a little endearing, but I could understand why someone would find him annoying.
I think it was just more that it felt like a lot of exposition to try to catch up characters.
Yeah, or the old people in the audience who didn't know what an escape room was.
Yeah, and I guess part of it was I prefer the House on Haunted Hill 1999 Dark Castle version where it's just like, I'm just here for the money. Like, I don't really care. But I wanted them to be in it faster, and I wanted them to realize that it was real faster. Like, his stubborn refusal to be like, no, we're not actually in any danger. This is just all fake. You're just like, Jesus Christ, buddy. Come on. Get with the program.
It's really not until midway through that second room in the ice that they figured out. But I did want to mention something about the money, though. It's $10,000. It's not even that much money being offered. I mean, obviously, I would love $10,000. I would love that. But I just feel like for a movie, like, it's a very small amount of money to be rewarded for something like this.
It's true. Like, in that 1999 version of House on Haunted Hill, isn't it something like $100,000 if they stay the night?
Yes. $100,000 per person, and the survivors get to get the dead people's split it up.
So $10,000 in 2019 money, 20 years
later.
This is like small change. This is small potatoes here, people.
Damn you, inflation! And it's even less in Canada money, right?
No, it'd be more in Canada money.
Oh, God damn it.
The US dollar is much stronger. Okay, so what else in this first room? So essentially, part of the escape room principle is that literally anything can be a clue, which I think is actually why when Zoe accidentally sets the room, not on fire, but when she sets off the oven timer, it's actually a really good twist on what you would expect, because so many of these rooms have lock key combinations and different things where you do play with them. So the idea that she would be like, oh, yeah, it's Fahrenheit 451, so she sets it to 451. You're like, okay, smart girl, yeah. And then, of course, it horribly goes wrong from there.
Well, and so, again, in my review that I remember discussing, I said that there was one sequence of genuine suspense in this movie, but there are two, because I do like the progression of the hot room, because, again, it doesn't all just turn on at once. It's like panels and panels after a certain amount of time. And so, yeah, I do like this sequence. I think it's really cool. I think it sets up a lot. That, but again, if you've seen the trailer, you've seen this sequence, which hurts it.
It's tricky. You've got to sell the film somehow, but it is frustrating that this is arguably the second best of the, 5 rooms?
Ooh, I'm interested to see what your favorite room is. Okay, so...
Sorry, no, there's 6 rooms in total, but I would still say that this is probably either second or third on my list.
It's second for me. Okay, so they get out. They go through a vent and they get into the next room, which starts out as a cabin. And to get out of the cabin, they have to use the code Rudolph, because when Ben killed his friends, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was playing in the car. And I have lots of questions about all of this, because I don't understand how these people knew
this was a big stretch. This did not work for me.
There's a ton of things where it's like, okay, I get it. Like, there are some things they would have known. All the clues have to do with these people's backstory. There was no way they would have known about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It does not make any fucking sense.
Well, and it's inherently based on this idea that Ben had to survive that first room. What happens if he was the one who sacrificed himself because he didn't have the flask or something? Like, it's one of those things where my problem with they have to work together or each of them has a skill to survive is that it should immediately then fall apart if one of them dies. And it never does. Narratively, that would not work, but it's hard when the movie wants you to be like, oh, okay, well, they had to do this thing to make it work. But the minute you start to think about it, it all falls apart.
And you know, you're right, though. Like, they would not have been able to get out of that cabin if Ben would have died in the oven room. So, good point. I didn't even catch that.
So they get out of the cabin.
And it's an icy lake. It's an ice-covered lake, which I almost hate that I knew this. So the ice, because I read the press packet before I went to go to my press screening, it's just hardwood that's painted.
Oh, really?
And so there's a
movie magic.
When they first walk out, though, and like there's a wide shot of the floor, it actually does look like hardwood that's painted blue.
Whereas I did not see it because I was not thinking about it.
Yeah, so if you ever watch it again, I can't imagine you would, but if you ever do, look for that. So
this is an exterior where the temperature drops. I did like this fact that they go from hot to cold. So it's like they're boiling hot and they took off all of their extremities and then they immediately go into a cold environment and it's like, haha, fuckers.
Well, because poor Deborah Ann Wall, like, she is the least clothed out of all of them. And she looks miserable this whole time. This is my third favorite room, by the way.
This is probably my fourth.
Fourth? Interesting. Okay. Oh, you know what? I'm thinking of a later room that I do like.
Yes, I'm counting the opening room that Ben escapes from as one of the 6.
Wait, so oven, ice, upside down, psychedelic white noise.
No, hospital,
white noise, and then the room crusher.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. No, you know what? Fuck it. It's 3 for me. This is number 3 still.
Okay.
So yeah, but they're given a jacket that they all have to share using, and eventually the ice starts to give out.
Well, sort of. I'm interested to hear what you think about this, because essentially what happens is it's not that the ice gives out, it's that there's an explosion right underneath where Danny is standing. So he falls underneath and then there's a current. Let's not think about the logistics of how they got water in a room within a skyscraper building.
Yeah, that didn't bother me whatsoever.
Yeah, that was one of those like, cool, I'm just going to go with it. Because they also have a hologram wall. Sure, let's go with that too.
Right, which again though, it's like, okay, so you have a hologram wall that only covers above the ice, but it doesn't stop the current beneath the ice. Whatever.
It doesn't short circuit. Despite the fact that it would clearly be an electrical wall touching a lot of water.
Details.
To me, it was very Cabin in the Woods, which I was like, check. Yes,
yeah,
I will give you a point for that. But I did think it was interesting that they turned on Ben at this point and they accused him of being the game master. I didn't like it in terms of a narrative development. It was a bit of an interesting minor diversion because all of a sudden it was like, oh, okay, we're getting a sense that they are going to play them off one another. But at the same time, the justification seemed very spotty to me.
I didn't like it when it was announced, and I think the only way that I would have liked it is if one of them actually was the game master.
Which I think also would have played better.
I do too. Honestly, I could have forgiven more of the movie's flaws, because then the game master would have been puppeteering, kind of orchestrating who does what.
Imagine if Jason had been the game master.
I mean, honestly, I don't even know if I would have liked that, but...
Well, he's kind of useless in terms of actually solving any of the puzzles, but...
He is.
It would have been like, oh, he's forcing so much conflict, and part of that reason is because he's actually trying to, like, drive people to make bad decision-making.
But then the whole, like, twist ending wouldn't really make any sense if they're trying to figure out who's the strongest to survive. So I get why that's not the case, but...
Well, we'll get to the ending in a bit, because I think we both have a lot to say about it.
I know.
Okay, so in this case, they melt the block of ice after they get it with the magnet, which is, this is all very, like, very typical escape room shit. Blah, blah, blah. They get into the third room. Okay.
Wait, no, you forgot that Danny falls through the ice and dies.
No, I did say that.
I did not hear you say that.
I said there's explosions under the ice. And Danny falls in.
Oh, I didn't hear Danny
and
falls
the current sweeps him away.
Okay, sorry.
Trace, you never listen to me.
I did. I thought I was. It's late. It's only 10 o'clock here. Anyway, so yeah, they go to the third room, which is my favorite room. And
100%. There is no other right choice. This is by far the best room.
And in my review, I said there's one genuinely suspenseful sequence, and it is this room. It's really just one moment, honestly, because the flooring kind of falls apart a little too slow for my taste. But the moment when Deborah Ann Wall jumps on that damn table and the ball falls out of her pocket, that whole, it's probably like 30 seconds, but I was on the edge of my seat in that whole part.
So I watch a lot of American Ninja Warrior during the summer.
I don't know what that is, but okay.
It's a reality TV competition on NBC. It's kind of like parkour, but obstacle course.
Oh, okay. I'm into it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's quite enjoyable. The feats that these individuals are able to pull off is really interesting, but there's a lot of differences in terms of upper body strength versus like springboarding and that kind of stuff. But watching Deborah Ann Wall try to negotiate hanging upside down, part of the joys of American Ninja Warrior is how long can people hold on when they're holding on by their fingertips, or how much upper body strength do they have if they have to hang on for like 2 minutes. Okay. So that piece was like, okay, she should be able to navigate getting around this upside down pool table. But then the complications start to pile up where it's like, okay, the ball drops and then she's got to get down to that. And then it's like, okay, can she now hang on to this stretchy elastic cord? And that's actually a different kind of obstacle in American Ninja Warrior, is where you have to hold on to a small object on like a spring, which is actually way harder than holding on to something that's fixed. So it's very much in keeping with all of that. And it's enjoyable enjoyable because Deborah Ann Woll is obviously in really good shape, and it's very believable that she'd be able to hold her own.
Yeah.
Which also helps that she's got that good backstory. So you're like, oh, okay, she is fit, she is tough, she can survive this. And you're also like, she's the most recognizable actress in the movie.
That's kind of my thing.
Probably going to make it. And then you're like, no, she's not going to make it. Never mind.
I felt really bad when she died. Like I was genuinely kind of upset. But that's the thing though, when a movie like this, or any movie really, it's like, okay, do I feel bad because I love Deborah Ann Woll, or do I feel bad because Deborah Ann Woll made that character so likable? I'm going to say it's a combination of both, because
I'd say both.
I do want to credit her with that. But yeah, like honestly, like I thought that phone cord was going to snap.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it didn't, I thought, oh, she's going to make it. And then she doesn't. She just dies.
Which is why that sequence works, because there's a bunch of different times where you actually think, like, I actually thought that Jason might die because he jumps down to rescue Zoe, and you're like, oh, he's gonna get her up, and then the floor's gonna fall out from under him.
Yeah, I thought that
and
too.
It doesn't, and you're like, yes, delay.
Which, yeah, that's how you make a good suspense sequence, though. You delay, and then once you finally have your audience in, like, a mostly safe feeling moment, that's when you pull the trigger, and they do in this sequence. But I will say how we've talked about how the script isn't the best. Jason has a line where he escapes the floor again, and he goes, "That's the second time this floor's tried to kill me." And I think my eyes rolled to the back of my head.
I kind of liked it because it's so bad it was almost good.
No, you're wrong. It's just bad. It's bad.
I also, okay, this is going to sound horrible, but that to me was like, this is a white person writing for a person of color, thinking that it's like,
oh my God,
this is my Will Smith moment. And you're like, no person, no.
I don't know. Yeah, so
welcome to Earth.
Basically, this room is an upside down diner, and it gets lifted to the top because it's actually an elevator, and it gets lifted to the top floor. And basically, they have to solve the puzzle as the floor is giving out beneath them to a bottomless elevator shaft. I'm sorry, there is a bottom because we do hear Deborah Ann Woll hit it, but it looks bottomless.
Because the building, when they first move into it, it looks like it's a good 25, 30, 40 stories tall.
Mm-hmm.
It also does not help the movie to think about the way that they navigate the rooms and where the rooms would be situated in the building for them to then get out on the ground floor. Don't do that. That also ruins your enjoyment.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, Deborah Ann Woll dies. And then they escape because she helped them in her dying breath. And this is when they go to the hospital room.
And this is when the movie starts to falter.
You're right, which is really upsetting for coming right after that sequence.
Well, it's a high, and then it's kind of like, all right.
And hospital room is my least favorite. By the way, ripoff of Saw 2 with the poison gas. I hate the poison. Like, I think that's so boring.
Well, the fact that they give you a 5-minute timer, to me, is also inherently disinteresting. It's funny that a character literally remarks, okay, well, now we know how much time we have. And I was like, boring. Like, it was so much more interesting to have the song play on the loop and have the audience be responsible for keeping track of when the floor was going to fall out. It's basically like an action movie countdown to a bomb detonation. I was like, ugh, boring.
And I'm backtracking to that room, but the song playing in that sequence is Petula Clark's Downtown. And I thought that the song was going to be a clue because it kept skipping over one part where it's like, where it says, listen to the music. And I was like, oh, there's a clue in the song. Like that's the reaction you should be getting from your audience. And that sequence is the one time that I got that like reaction in this movie. So that the rest of it does not have those moments for me is like kind of why I gave it a 2.5 out of 5 in my review.
Ouch. Ooh, okay.
2.5 out of 5, but it's a fresh on Rotten Tomatoes because it's a positive leaning 2.5 out of 5.
There we go.
So
yeah, so this hospital triage, I think it basically exists not even as a room really for them to escape. It's a room to give you the backstories or to confirm all of the suspicions that we already had.
And maybe that's the problem. Maybe this sequence comes too late. Like, honestly,
I think so.
You switch the poison room with the ice room, and I think you might have a better movie.
Particularly if you don't actually need them. Like, what do they do with the information? They're like, oh, okay.
Nothing.
Well, okay, that's not entirely true. So Zoe figures out that essentially the people who are manipulating the game are doing this because of their shared trait. So she kind of deduces like, oh, they're playing us off against each other to figure out whether or not one of us is more lucky, which again, inherently is an interesting concept, but doesn't actually come to anything apart from the fact that she's like, okay, between my ramble word salad that she utters at the beginning of the film, you know, that she pulls out when her roommate is getting ready, which are like, ugh, whatever, I'm sure it'll become important later, blah.
Yeah. Put that
really,
in your
apart
back
from
pocket.
that, but that also could have been introduced later on. Like she could have pieced it together throughout different rooms and then been like, no, we need to rebel. We're not making it. We keep dying in these rooms. We need to change something up. It didn't have to be that same room.
Right. No, I get that. Yeah. Well,
it's also just, it's visually fucking boring. Like to go from an upside down room filled with interesting production details to then Saw 3.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, that room is Saw 3. From the way it's lit, from the way it looks, and even with the poison. Like, if you're gonna rip off Saw, which by all means, do it, don't steal a set from Saw. Like,
we gotta do something more interesting with it. You can't just rip it off.
Well, and that's the thing, too. Like, this movie should build from, like, least impressive to impressive, and it kind of is like a mishmash. It goes from, like, high to, like, middling to really high to super low to, like, a little bit better to the same.
Yeah.
So Zoe starts smashing all of the secret cameras, and it feels like it goes on forever.
Way too long. There should be like 3 cameras in that room.
I know. There was like 20. In the meantime, they're having to work on this defibrillator, and Jason is shocking Mike with it because they think they have to get their heart racing, but it's actually the opposite. So they basically kill Mike for no reason.
Yeah. Which again could be kind of interesting. I think it would have almost worked better if it had been Ben who was shocking him, because you would have then gotten that emotional reaction like, oh fuck, I made this terrible mistake, or I did it again, like I killed people accidentally again. And instead it's Jason being like, I'm gonna zap you again, and then they get out, and I kept waiting for Mike to wake up because I was like, they can't honestly kill him this way. That's so pathetic.
Well, and also I guess the way that Zoe isn't really dead is because they're not going to kill 2 people in one room. That's just not like, that's not a rule of these movies that can happen. But yeah, so Mike's dead, and then Jason slows down his heart rate to 50 beats per minute somehow, and that's
because
how they
he's
escape.
super zen.
I know. It's so stupid. Nothing else of interest happens in this room. Ben and Jason get out.
So that's your least favorite?
I'm going to say, yeah, that's my least favorite room.
So I'm kind of cheating. This is either my least favorite or my second least favorite.
Okay.
It's like a bit of a tie.
Okay, so going into the next room, which is a visual representation of white noise on a TV screen. This is my 4th favorite room, and it probably would be 3rd if there was something more to it than just Ben and Jason being on hallucinogens.
I call this the trippy zebra room.
But it wasn't zebra, it was white noise.
To me, there isn't even something interesting for them to do. Like, I get that they are poisoned and the escape in this situation is actually them having to battle each other. But again, it's not satisfying to have Ben accidentally kill your main principal villain. To me, it happens a little too quickly. Not that I'd really want to draw out longer.
They cram a lot into this scene, though, because that's also when they reveal that Jason killed is his brother or his friend? I don't even know.
I think it's his friend.
Okay, kills his friend in his trauma flashback. So they do that. Ben realizes it. Then they get in a fight. Then they try to find the antidote, which... Also, now you mention it, yeah, it's 2 rooms in a row of poison. What the fuck is that?
I mean, I like the visual representation when they are high and they're hallucinating and their faces distort and the room distorts. Like, it's trippy. I feared for anyone who may be epileptic.
We had a warning, like a little sign at the entrance to the theater. Because after the Incredibles 2 thing happened, I think all theaters are being really self-conscious about that. So, yeah, we had a warning about epilepsy for this movie.
Oh, I went to like a discount theater, so maybe they can't afford a sign.
They couldn't print it on the paper. A discount theater, though? Really? Ugh.
Yeah, man. $5 Tuesday movies. It's great.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we don't have anything. Well, I guess I don't really go to non-draft house cinemas anymore, so I don't really know what a ticket below $13 feels like.
Oh, my God. Trace, check your privilege.
No, because every time we have AMCs and Cinemarks and other theaters. I mean, Regal's here. But every time I go, the audience is so terrible. Whereas in the Draft House, they're all quiet.
Well, it's because they're getting sexually assaulted. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so Jason's dead, and Ben is like, yay, I'm the sole survivor, and we're back to the beginning, and we've already seen it. Thankfully, I actually thought that they were just going to replay the sequence over
I did too.
I was like, oh, thank God. Okay, they did not do this.
So yeah, they cut back to Zoe, which, total side note though, so I was talking to someone on Facebook, and he was like, so wait, what were you talking about in your review? When like, what part of the ending did they show? Because he goes, I was late to the movie and came in during like the character introductions. And I was like, I was like, you probably had a better experience than I did then, but they showed the whole Ben sequence. And he goes, oh, I thought it was just really bad editing. I was wondering why they didn't show him in that room at all.
That'd be not a completely different experience, but it would be very different.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they cut away to Zoe, who did not die despite like foaming at the mouth earlier in the movie.
Gay gasp.
Yeah, whatever. So two like people in radioactive coats come in. They're gonna take her body away, and they're making some snide remarks that like the 1% would say or something. And then she gets up and beats them up, and then runs away. This little tiny girl.
Yeah, I mean, I was fine with it. I mean, I get mad at people when they hang around after they beat their attackers, but part of me was also kind of like, wouldn't you want to know who these people are? Like, as she leaves the room, there's an entire wall full of medication.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, okay, is that in case people get sick, or is that just to restock the room, kind of like a real escape room is, where they have to fix it, you know? Because I think a woman says, we've got 20 minutes before we need to reset this room. To which I was like, why? How many people are you putting through these traps in a day?
We'll get there when we talk about the ending, which we're almost at. So Ben is in his little crushing room, and he gets out by squeezing into the fireplace somehow. It's really kind of weird.
To be honest, your friend is not wrong. It's not well edited this second run through, because I was like, it looks like his face is getting crushed, and then he somehow manages to push forward and get into the fireplace.
Through all of the furniture that is between him and the fireplace. It doesn't make a lot of sense. At this point, I'm just like, okay, like let's go, movie. Let's go.
Like, let's get to the ending.
So, Ben emerges the winner, quote unquote, and the rapist from Dragon Tattoo like greets him. and he says, he basically like does the obligatory villain exposition dump that explains everything, kind of, but not really.
Yeah, it's enough to whet the appetite.
Yeah, they were picked to see, like, all these lone survivors, who would be the lone survivor of the lone survivors. And it's rich people paying money and making bets to see this.
But correct me if I'm wrong, does the guy say that they are the third iteration, and that they had started with different types of groups, and then they had selected them because they were like, oh, we wanted to see if luck was a thing.
Well, so that, I don't know if it was the third, but they're definitely not the first group to go through the escape room process. I'm sorry, like whatever, like the death room process. Because he lists like 2 or 3 other type groups of people. Right. And they are the first ones of just lone survivors. So they basically like pick people with certain traits that share certain traits to see which among them is like the strongest.
Which makes sense. If you're looking to bet on things, you would need, statistically, you would want, some kind of comparable so that you could say like, oh, here's why I might place my bet on one person over another.
Which this is when it gets into Hostel 2 territory for me. And I'm betting you if a sequel is made, there's going to be a betting sequence. And if there is, I'm going to call bullshit, because that was already done in Hostel 2 really well. But we're not talking about Hostel 2.
Maybe one day.
We will absolutely get to it. So Ben wins, but then they're going to kill him anyway.
Yes.
So basically,
because they clearly don't leave any survivors.
Yeah, they don't. But then Zoe comes out and she shoots the bad guy. Is that what she does?
She shoots him, but then she gets hit, and then Ben saves her, and it's all just traditional action movie climax bullshit.
Yeah, I didn't love, yeah.
And again, we're into bad set territory. I was like, so wait, where's this supposed to be in this building? Because it looks like they're in a fucking Reservoir Dogs underground parking lot. Like, it was so uninspired.
I think your trademark for this podcast is going to be the set guy, because that's all you want to talk about on Swim Fan 2.
It's because my eye is it's a visual medium. People, give me something interesting. Like, especially this one, they had such a huge space, And it's like, this guy has set up a circle of television equipment with a giant board. Like, why does he need giant boards with the players' faces on it? And then like a comfy couch.
Well, that's the thing too, is why is there even an explanation of this? Why don't they just kill Ben like immediately? Because them explaining this process to them, if they're gonna kill him anyway, serves no purpose.
We're running excessively long, so let's get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
Tell me the truth. Do you think this ending was added on when they realized that this movie had strong commercial prospects and that they could turn it into a franchise? Because it feels like a tack on.
Well, no, because, okay, so this happens, they escape. Then there's a scene where Zoe goes back to the building. She takes the cops there. And it's a deserted building. Like, there's nothing there. And it looks like a decrepit, abandoned building. There's no escape rooms or anything. And the scene ends with her screaming. And, like, she's lost. And I thought, okay,
so
cool.
Ending number 1.
And honestly, the movie would have been better had it ended there. Not super satisfying, honestly, but fine. Then it cuts forward like 6 months, and Zoe and Ben are still friends for some reason. And they're getting lunch, and Ben's trying to move on, and she's putting it all together. Yeah, she's put it all together. She's trying to she's going to be like a bounty hunter for this damn organization. And she's got plane tickets to somewhere where the headquarters supposedly is.
New York.
Yes. So, okay, cool. Then he agrees to help her. Boom. Ending number 2. Do you want to take ending number 3? Because you already talked about it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so ending number 3 is the trial attempt of them setting up a new killer escape room that, again, is this meant to fool us? Because right off the bat, I was like, oh, okay, so this is another escape room. I think the only question is whether or not you're meant to be like, oh, this is the new group of people that they're putting through this escape room.
Which, admittedly, I thought that's what it was.
Okay, so does its job. And then it turns out to be, nope, this is actually the trial run through to perfect the room so that they can put Zoe and Ben through this in anticipation of their trip to New York. And that's the end.
They make a line where it's like, oh, thank God she got over her fear of flying. Because, she was in a plane accident.
Plane crash.
Yeah. So, like, oh, but the simulation will be ready by the time they make their flight. So basically, they know all about like what they're doing. And I can only assume that they're also kind of leaving that because then if they want, they don't have to have Zoe and Ben come back for the sequel. But if they do, then they can still make it work.
Okay, so your prediction then, because 100% this movie is getting a sequel, it's already made enough money to justify it, and it's tailor-made. So it's not a doubt, it's just a when. I'm willing to bet that it will open with Zoe being killed in that way, and then it will be a new bunch of people.
I would be okay with that. I mean, no offense to Taylor Russell, I think she's fine in this movie, but like her character is so boring.
Is there anything left for her to do? Unless she goes like hardcore Sarah Connor or something.
Which would make her interesting. Maybe they kill Ben in the beginning. Like she survives somehow and he dies. And like that adds to her personal vendetta because they're such good friends.
Such good friends. At least they didn't make them romantic interests, which is what I thought they were going to do with that final scene.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So there are some wise choices in this movie. There are some bad choices. I mean, again, my 2.5 out of 5, I almost gave it a 3. But honestly, I just think it's fine. I get that it's fun, but because the movie falls apart for me so much after that awesome diner sequence, that it colored my perception of the entire movie. And also because the revelations that are presented aren't really that revelatory?
No. Yeah, I gave it a 3. I waffled between a 3 and a 3.5, and then it was kind of the same thing that you just talked about, where it's like, yeah, you know what? It's fine. It's enjoyable. I would probably recommend it to other horror fans, but it's always with that asterisk and that caveat where you're like, it's not as bad as it could be, or like it's good for a January release. Like, we're not going to be talking about this on our top 10 list of 2019.
Reviews for the film are fine for, like, again, a January horror release. It has 53% on Rotten Tomatoes, but then the audience score is 62%, with an average score of 3.5 out of 5 for audiences.
Which is still pretty good for horror, though.
Yeah, critics average is 5 out of 10, which that's exactly what I gave it, so. But, yeah, so I mean, it's going to do well. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the sequel as early as next January.
Yeah, I'd be wary of that, but yeah, neither would I. We'll see. I think if we see the announcement that they're moving ahead with a sequel in the next couple of weeks, then yes, they'll be aiming for next year. If it takes them a little while, I'd be interested to see if they actually manage to pump it out that quickly.
I wonder if they'll try to turn it into a summer release.
I think it'd make more sense. They could make more money with it.
We'll see what kind of legs it has, because I mean, it made $18 million, but there isn't a horror movie coming out until Glass, so maybe this weekend it'll still do well, but it's going to drop off like sharp after this weekend if it doesn't drop off this weekend.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh, we're recording this the week after it aired. Yeah, so any closing final thoughts on Escape Room?
If I have my wish, it's that they make a prequel as opposed to a sequel.
Boo, no.
Because they've got 2 other groups, so you could actually see them working to perfect the rooms.
Did you see Jigsaw? Spoilers!
So basically what Trace is saying is he just wants to do a bunch of Patreon episodes where he can talk about the Saw movies.
I'm just saying it's the same. Like, what you're asking is what Jigsaw gave us.
Yeah. Okay, so you said I'm going to be the set guy, but to be honest, most of the time, my major gripe is the number of times that a script lets a movie down. And for me, almost all the Saw movies, it's always the script that lets it down.
We can never really cover the Saw movies because there's nothing inherently queer about any of them. But maybe for future Patreon episodes.
Yeah, let us know if people are interested.
I don't think anyone's interested in the Saw movies, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so Trace, where can people find you on the Twitters?
Yes, so you can find me on Twitter at Traced Thurman. That's Trace D as in dog, Thurman. And what about you, Joe?
I am at B Stole My Remote, as in the letter B. And if you want to get a hold of us, please use the hashtag HorrorQueers, as that'll make it easier for you to find us and us to find you.
Yep. Also, if you're listening to this, that means you are part of our Patreon. So thank you so much for spending money on us there that you even think that we're worth paying for. That's very nice of you.
Yeah, we sounded very flippant off the top, but...
No, we're super grateful.
We don't make money off this. We're not getting rich off of it. So really what you're doing is you're paying so that we can record more often. So if you like us, then you want to hear more of us, and it's like a beautiful circle of life kind of thing.
Yeah, and also there's a ton of podcasts out there. I mean, I think I read recently that like in 3 months, 7,000 new podcasts were brought up.
Oh, God.
So thank you for picking us to listen to.
Yeah. Hopefully we're not too annoying with all of our Saw ramblings.
Okay, well, that marks the end of our first Patreon episode.
Ah, Escape Room. You are crossed out.
Crossed out Escape Room.
You did not win our hearts, but we would still recommend you.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Shelby Scott, the host of Scare You to Sleep, a podcast where I tell you spooky bedtime stories full of creepy sound effects and music that is soothing yet unsettling to help immerse you into a world of horror. This is a show for those of us who have realized horror can be a strange but relaxing escape from reality. Speaking of escapes, sometimes I lead you through guided nightmares, like a guided meditation, but instead of flowery meadows, I take you on a journey through your own personal nightmare. So come get lost in the terror with me. Listen to Scare You to Sleep wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us online at bloody.fm. Sweet screams.